If you're a teacher and you received a notice of non-renewal, you may be wondering what your options are. The specific options that are available depend on the state in which you work at, whether or not you're in a union, if you teach in a public, private, or charter school, and things like that. You're also probably really scared and frustrated with what's going on because a lot of times we feel powerless when we're put into this situation. So in today's video, I'm going to be covering what a notice of non-renewal is, what your options are, and some considerations so that you can make the best decision moving forward. Now, before we dive into this, the best decision that you can make right now is to hit that like and subscribe button so that you don't miss any future content on this channel. So what is a notice of non-renewal? It basically means that your contract isn't going to be renewed for the following school year. And this can happen for a number of reasons. It could be based on performance. It could be based on budget cuts or reduce in personnel. There's actually a lot of different reasons why administrators will issue a notice of non-renewal. So before you take any action, the main thing that you want to do upon receiving this notice is to review it carefully. You want to understand the reasons for why this was issued to you. Make sure that the reasons align with the terms of the contract that you signed when you got the job, and that those reasons are actually valid. And if you have any questions or concerns about those reasons, then be sure to get clarification from human resources, from your administrator, and then if you have one, a union. You definitely want to also ask for specific evidence or examples for the non-renewal, especially if it is performance-based. So once you've explored the reasons as to why you got that, one of the first things that you can do is to request a hearing. In most states, teachers that receive a notice of non-renewal can request a hearing before an independent hearing officer. So the independent hearing officer will review the notice and the evidence, and they'll make a recommendation to the school board. And from there, the school board can determine whether or not to go through with the non-renewal. Now, this next option depends on whether or not you have a union. If you do have a union, then you can file a grievance. If you believe that the non-renewal is unjust, then you're going to want to consider challenging this by going through your district's grievance process. So this might involve filing a formal complaint and presenting evidence to support your claim. And if you are part of a union, they're most likely going to be helping you out with this and giving you additional resources. The union can also do their own investigation and file their own complaint on your behalf if they believe that the non-renewal is unwarranted. And then the school district will have an opportunity to respond to this complaint. And if the union is not satisfied with that response, then they can also back you up in terms of filing a lawsuit against the district. Now, here's the thing. If you work in what's called a right-to-work state, then that means that teachers have fewer rights, and most likely you don't have union representation. And even if you did have union representation, it's probably not very strong, or it's not really going to help you out in this case. In right-to-work states, teachers aren't even required to join unions. And so if you're not part of the union, you might not have any support. It also means that you're probably not going to have the same rights to file a grievance as you would if you weren't living in a right-to-work state. And so you'll have fewer options, including you might not even have the option to have a hearing. Also, this grievance process depends on whether or not you work at a private, a charter, or a public school. So teachers that work in private schools tend to not have any options or anyone to support or grieve this process. You're going to have fewer rights because you're not governed by a district that is being run with public funds. It's a privately funded school, and so the administrators can hire and fire at will. On the other hand, public school teachers tend to have more options because they are being paid by public funds, by a lot of times by taxes and things like that. And so that gives you more protection in that case, but if you don't have a union, it's still not necessarily going to help to keep your job. Charter schools are a little bit more like public schools in that they are also publicly funded, but a lot of times the way that they have their contracts, they're not necessarily long-term contracts. You might actually be on a year-to-year basis, and so a non-renewal might become kind of a regular thing. So if you do decide to stay with a charter school or apply to a charter school, I would definitely check the contract to see what is the process for becoming tenured, or if you even have an option to be tenured there. I've actually read of instances of teachers in private and charter schools where their contracts are year to year, and And a lot of times those schools just like to get rid of teachers after a certain amount of time because it's easier to not keep you past a certain number of years, let's say 4 or 5 years where you become tenured or permanent. So they just like to keep the turnover so that they're not stuck with any teacher for an indefinite amount of time. So your third option is to actually find a job somewhere else. So if you are non-renewed, you can consider teaching at another district, at another school maybe. Maybe it's just you got a non-renewal from that one school and you can apply to a different school. Or maybe you just want to teach in another state altogether. From what I've heard from other teachers who received this non-renewal notice, they kind of just don't even want to finish up the school year. They're at a point where they're so bitter about getting this in the first place because a lot of times the reasons that they're getting it, they don't agree with. So if your administrator puts performance reasons and you're looking at this and you have no way of defending yourself, it makes you not even want to stay there till the end of the school year. Now, I really caution you against leaving in the middle of the year if you get this non-renewal and you want to keep on teaching, because it'll definitely hurt your chances of getting a job at a different school. However, even if you do fight this non-renewal and you win, you're still going to be in the school, probably with the same administrator, and that can make it really hard to want to stay. You're always going to be wondering if that principal is going to be finding reasons to get rid of you again. So an option is definitely to just look elsewhere for employment. So obviously this is going to mean updating your resume, getting letters of recommendation from your colleagues or administrators that you've had in the past that do have a favorable opinion of you. If you're a new teacher, you can get letters of recommendation from the professors where you got your teaching credential, wherever your teaching training program was at. But basically, you want to network and you want to look for other job opportunities as soon as you get this renewal notice, or if grieving the process or getting a hearing is unsuccessful. So a big consideration that a lot of teachers are grappling with when they get this notice of non-renewal is whether or not they should accept it or if they should just resign. So this means that if you accept it, that the non-renewal is going to be on your record, as opposed to resigning where you kind of got in before the chance of that non-renewal to hit your record. In fact, I've definitely heard of some administrators suggesting to teachers that they just resign so they can avoid getting the non-renewal. Now, whether or not you do one or the other depends on several factors. And this includes the reason for the non-renewal, what your career goals are, and of course your financial situation. Now, one reason why you might want to accept the non-renewal is because maybe the reasons that they gave you are valid. Maybe they are valid, and it's going to be really hard to fight it or really hard to win if you were to grieve this case. So if you're not going to be successful with this challenging decision, then accepting it might be the best decision for you. And then you just start looking for a new job. Some teachers are afraid that having that non-renewal on their record is going to hurt them from getting another job, but it just really depends on why you got the non-renewal. And accepting the non-renewal if you already were going to leave could be a good option and just sort of motivate you to go. Another reason why people would want to accept a non-renewal is because it allows them to apply for unemployment benefits. Now, in terms of how to get those unemployment benefits, you need to look that up in your particular state or county or city, but accepting the non-renewal is almost like getting laid off, so it makes it easier for you to get the unemployment benefits. So resigning will pretty much keep that non-renewal from ever showing up on your record, because sometimes districts will do background checks or they'll go back to the school that you taught at previously and ask questions. And so if you don't want that to go out that you got a non-renewal, then formally resigning could be your best option, especially if you want to continue teaching. Sometimes teachers look at a negative performance evaluation from a particularly hostile administrator, or they're just in a situation where they never even really had a chance because the administrators seem to have it out for them. So just formally resigning could give them the kind of fresh start that they need for when they're applying to a new school. However, it's also the opposite of taking that non-renewal, in that once you resign, you can't file for unemployment. And so that's a financial decision that you need to consider if you need that unemployment to hold you over until you get another job. So obviously, this is a really, really tough time right now because you're faced with this feeling of rejection, and a lot of times it just feels so unfair. So even if you get a non-renewal because there's going to be lower enrollment the following year, so they're letting go of teachers, or for financial reasons, it's still really like a punch in the gut when you get this notice. So at this point, I would definitely seek out support from other teachers who are going through the same process and who have gone through this before. You can go onto Facebook groups, and they have Facebook groups specifically for teachers who've gotten non-renewals. There are also Reddit subgroups, like the ones just Reddit for teachers. They have a lot of support for teachers who received a non-renewal. But right now is the time to surround yourself with other supportive colleagues who've been through it before, and even your colleagues who haven't been through it before, they can definitely support you. But it just feels really good to talk to someone who's been through it, so that they can commiserate with you and give you advice on what to do next. I can't give you specific advice because of the fact that your situation is different from everybody else's. I don't know what type of school you teach at, the state that you teach at, whether or not you have a union, things like that. So I would definitely reach out to other teachers, but use this video and the information that you got here as a jumping off point to know so that you can explore what your next options are. So if you did get your notice and you definitely want to quit your job right now, but you don't want to quit teaching, then check out this video next to give you some ideas on what to do next.